So, ThreatQuotient, you recently published, I think, the State of Cybersecurity Automation 22 research report. And I think the main finding was around the fact that security automation budgets are increasingly, not just a little bit, but quite significantly. So can you give us a bit more sort of detail on that?
Sure. Yeah, that's absolutely what the data is seems to be telling us. In fact, you say significantly, it was the case for 98% of companies, which is a pretty substantial number. But I think most of the practitioners who may be watching this out there probably won't see that as really a surprise. Because security teams, at least the ones that we work with, are under constant pressure to do more with very limited resources. And then when you combine that with challenges of finding skilled staff and their availability in the workforce, it's only logical that people are looking to automation to try and improve some of that, because you can't just throw more manpower at the problem.
Okay, so you've outlined a couple of reasons that sounds like there's an increased sort of budgets for security automation, but I'm thinking as well perhaps that people have more faith, more trust in the fact that, again, I know in the early days AI, people are a bit nervous of it, what's going on under the covers, etc. But it seems as if people have got more trust that when they invest in security automation solution, they can leave it, get on and do what it says rather than constantly worry about it.
Yeah, well, again, the data is telling us that 88% of respondents this year said they have some trust in security automation, which is up from 59% last year. I think the main driver of that is actually a change in expectations of what security automation can achieve. And I think that's natural. I think of myself going back to the year 2000, I tried to plug my intrusion detection system into my firewall. So every time an IP address calls an event, let's go block it. I quickly found that I was shooting myself in the foot because my expectation that that would work was clearly years ahead of its time, and it didn't work. So organizations with a more focus on atomic bits of automation are getting much more value out of it than their overhyped expectations of years before.
Okay, and interesting, the example you just gave about yourself there, I think the survey uncovered that if there are any issues around security automation, it is around the implementation. So again, is that because people are not understanding what's capable, what they should be doing, or just any thoughts as to the reasons behind that, the disjoint in terms of implementing security automation?
Yeah, I think it's back to the expectation element. If people's expectations are too high and they try to achieve too much, the outcomes aren't so great. Playbook-based or process-based automation is great for some things and not other things. So let's quickly talk about what things it's good for, and then let's look at what the things it's bad at. And the area I think is ripe for innovation is the area that it's bad at, and that's what we're trying to deal with. So process-based automation is really good when you know the outcome you're aiming at. If you want to try and reset a user's password on 8 systems, when you start your job, you know what the desired outcome is. So 8 systems with different passwords set on them. But with security detection and response, it's a very different game entirely. An analyst opens up a ticket, then they start an investigation. They don't know what they're going to have to deal with when they start. That ticket could have been a benign false positive, it could have been a trivial a spearfish email, or it could be something which is incredibly sophisticated, resulting in a potential company-wide compromise. Process-based automation is good for the first thing, but you need a different approach for that investigative detection and response style automation. And that's what we're trying to build. We call that data-driven automation.
Okay, and also I'm wondering whether what you've explained there is also the reason. I know there's some challenge, I think the survey uncovered, for organizations in terms of justifying or building the case for security automation. And again, is that perhaps, as you say, if there's a very logical, if we do A, we'll get B outcome, everyone goes, yeah, that's fine, we'll give that a tick. But if it's a little less obvious, what you're doing to the result, maybe companies, organizations are slightly more reluctant to release the purse strings. Is that correct?
Yeah, we're seeing at least the data is showing us, and we're seeing from conversations with our customers, there is a whole variety of different drivers for buying. ROA is clearly required. There are desires to drive down things like mean time to detection and mean time to response. But we're also seeing very different drivers in other markets. We're going to put out more information about this in about when we put out the full report in a few weeks' time. But one interesting stat that I'll talk about now is, which I found very interesting, is the top driver for implementing security automation in the defense sector in the UK isn't one of mean time detection or mean time to response. The data is showing us that it's actually for employee retention and employee well-being, which is really interesting when you think about the makeup of that defense sector, because they're investing a lot of time and money in training up people to be able to do cybersecurity jobs. And there's a lot of companies in the commercial market dangling potentially larger paychecks at them. So that quality of life through automation, getting rid of the mundane stuff that they don't like doing, is clearly seems to be more important for them.
Okay, and in terms of the ThreatQuotient yourselves, I know you have the ThreatQ TDR security automation solution, and I believe you've introduced some new features. But before we come onto those, perhaps you can just outline what the solution itself is, and then we can look at the new bits.
Sure. The solution itself. Our customers have been asking to drive more automation into their processes for years, and we embarked on a journey of really looking at what the state of the art is in the market, and that's when we uncovered some of these limitations in this process-based automation. We were seeing the products that were out there available, and we were seeing some people trying to implement them, and there was a bit of a disconnect with what people were asking us about and the problem space that this detection and response and security intelligence needs had that were different. So we scratched our head a little while, and then we looked long and hard at the technologies that we have, and we uncovered we've got a component which is a core of our platform that we call Data Link, that has allowed us to build this fundamentally different approach to automation, which is really aimed and ideal for that detection response use case. And that led us to build ThreatQ TDR Orchestrator, which is a different approach to doing automation.
Okay, and in terms of the new features you've added, be good to know what those are, and the obvious thing as well is the benefits, because you don't just introduce features for the heck of it. There's a reason why you're doing it. So what will users notice? What's the difference?
Sure. So the first thing that people will see that are used to using our product in the past with this latest release is there is a new super simplistic workflow builder available to them. Now, I say the word simplistic. Simplistic doesn't mean limited or bad or ineffective. Simplistic to us means good. It means it's approachable, it's maintainable, it's manageable, it's easy to use, so people can achieve the things they need to achieve. So as soon as they start to use this new workflow builder, I think they'll see the power of what you can achieve with this alternative data-driven approach to automation.
Okay, and in terms of the work you do with your clients, I mean, clearly, as you alluded to earlier, you've got them in a lot of different industries, and I suspect they all have slightly different, needs and views on security automation. But are you able to share sort of one or two cases, whether you're able to name names or not, as to the sort of things you've been able to help some of your customers, deal with?
Yeah, I'll choose to not name any names, but let's take two extreme examples. So one from the super sophisticated and one from the much more basic. So on the super sophisticated style, a story that we heard from one of our customers that I really like was, so they're a global technology vendor, a name that most of your audience would have known, would have heard of. And they are that classic style of target for sophisticated adversaries and attackers and campaigns. So they've got a bunch of smart people who are looking at their own information. They can't just rely off the shelf data from security vendors. They built up a very interesting data-driven process that aggregates information from a variety of their internal sources, plus what's available from a lot of private data sources as well, to identify specific characteristics of new threats, like new malicious domain names or URLs that could be used in spear phishing attacks against them. And as soon as they see certain characteristics in this data from that aggregate of all the information, their internal knowledge, the external knowledge, private intelligence, government intelligence, then they automatically, through automation on our product, create a global single response, which blocks that capability across a whole variety of entry and exit points across all of their estate. So that's like the super sophisticated. So on the more simplistic side, we have multiple customers in the financial vertical who are trying to achieve very specific things with data they're provided from ISACs they belong to. So as soon as they bring in some new information about potentially interesting malware that could be targeting their specific vertical, automatically execute EDR actions to identify it's been on any of their endpoints. And using ThreatQ TDR Orchestrator, that is very, very simple to achieve.
Okay, and in terms of maybe sort of wrapping up, for people almost irrelevant where they are on their security automation journey, are there any sort of one or two key bits of advice you'd give? I mean, I guess it's slightly different. If you're starting out, maybe it's slightly different from people who are trying to do stuff with it and maybe not getting the results they want. Just one or two bits of advice as to the things to look for in terms of a solution and how you go about implementing it. I mean, the sophisticated one you said, obviously, you're almost sounds like globally sorting that, whereas people might need to start a little bit more locally. I don't know. Do you have just some thoughts as to how to proceed?
Sure. I've said a couple of words a few times, like setting expectations and simplicity. Those are the things to keep in mind. If you're just because something is simple doesn't mean it's bad. You can get a lot of value out of simplistic automation, and taking a data-driven approach makes it so much easier to achieve that. So if you are starting out building up your first playbook, and you suddenly find yourself looking at like Frankenstein's monster of automation, stop and ask yourself, are you trying to achieve something that is viable? And if you find yourself having to build that Frankenstein's monster, maybe taking a look at a data-driven approach could be a viable alternative.
Excellent. And I think I probably should make a correction, because I think at the start of the interview I said that you'd published your report, and if I memory serves, you've actually been kind enough to share some sort of early insights, and the report's out a little bit later, so we can maybe revisit that when the whole report's out and look at the different sectors and stuff. But at least for now, Leon, I'm really grateful for your time, so thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
My pleasure, Phil.